Eli Carter sat in his cluttered workshop, the hum of his old, rusted tools creating a comforting rhythm. It was an ordinary day in the small town of Redfield, Earth, and nothing about his life seemed out of the ordinary. He wasn't a genius, nor did he have any grand ambitions. He liked working with his hands, fixing things, and enjoying the simplicity of his life. But that comfort would be shattered in an instant. A brilliant flash of light pierced the sky, followed by a low hum that vibrated the ground beneath him. Eli glanced out the window, his heart skipping a beat. What he saw defied any explanation. A massive, disc-shaped vessel, far larger than anything human technology had ever produced, hovered silently above the town. It emitted an eerie, otherworldly glow. Panic surged through him, but before he could react, a strange, almost magnetic force seemed to pull him toward the craft. His body moved of its own accord, the air thick with an unnatural energy that made his hair stand on end. He was swept up into the vessel, his surroundings warping as if the very fabric of reality was bending. Before he knew it, Eli was standing in a vast, sterile chamber surrounded by figures whose features were like nothing he had ever seen. Tall, sleek, and shimmering, their skin reflected the light of distant stars, their eyes glowing with an intelligence far beyond human comprehension. They were alien, yet there was something undeniably commanding about their presence. The voice that spoke next was not a sound but a sensation, a deep, resonating thought that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It filled Eli's mind, sending a shiver down his spine. "Eli Carter," the voice said, "you have been chosen." He tried to speak, but his mouth felt dry, his voice failing him. The words echoed through his head, and though he couldn't explain why, he knew they weren't mere words. They were an invitation, a summons from a force greater than anything he could understand. "What do you mean?" he finally managed to ask, his voice trembling. The beings surrounding him remained silent for a moment, their glowing eyes never leaving him. Then, another thought penetrated his mind, clear and direct. "Your species is on the verge of something far greater than you realize. You possess a unique potential, a talent that has been detected by the Celestial Assembly." Eli's heart raced as he tried to process what he was hearing. The Celestial Assembly. The name felt ancient, yet incredibly familiar, like something buried deep in the back of his mind. Who were these beings? And why him? "You will undergo trials, tests of strength, intellect, and will. The Assembly seeks to understand your potential. If you succeed, your place in the universe will be secured. If you fail," the voice trailed off, leaving the threat hanging in the air. Eli felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He wasn't sure what was happening, but something inside him told him that this wasn't a dream or a hallucination. This was real, and no matter how much he wanted to deny it, he could feel that something extraordinary was happening to him. "But why me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. There was a brief pause before the voice responded again. "You are not like the others. You are different. Your latent abilities have awakened." At that moment, Eli felt it, a sudden, overwhelming surge of energy coursing through his body. It was as if every cell in his being vibrated with the force of 1,000 storms, and for the first time in his life, Eli felt truly alive. His surroundings flickered, the walls bending as if they, too, were affected by the raw power now thrumming within him. Before he could react, the chamber around him seemed to dissolve, replaced by the vastness of space itself. Stars twinkled beyond him, distant and untouchable, while ships, hundreds of them, floated in the void, each one bearing strange, unfamiliar markings. Eli's gaze darted across the endless expanse, realizing just how small and insignificant Earth had been all along. But now he was part of something far greater. "Prepare yourself, Eli Carter. The trials have begun." The words echoed through his mind, and in that moment, Eli knew that his life was about to change forever. Whether he was ready or not, he had just been thrust into a galaxy of possibilities and dangers that he couldn't begin to understand. Eli's pulse raced as the ship carried him deeper into the unknown. The starry expanse outside the window seemed endless, a galaxy far beyond Earth's familiar horizons. The strange, luminous beings surrounding him didn't seem to acknowledge his presence, until the moment he felt the vessel descend. The door opened, revealing a world unlike anything he had ever seen. The air was thick with the scent of alien flora, and towering structures of silver and crystal rose from the ground in geometrical patterns that defied logic. This planet, Seranus, was the heart of the celestial assembly, a place where species from across the universe competed for power, influence, and knowledge. Eli was about to be thrust into the most important competition of his life, but he couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of being out of his depth. The beings from earlier, now revealed as the Korshak, escorted him to an arena unlike anything he could have imagined. It was a massive circular stadium surrounded by towering walls of shifting energy, like a living structure, constantly reconfiguring itself. At the center, a series of floating platforms hovered above a shimmering surface, the arena in which he would face his first trial. "You are about to face your first challenge," a Korshak leader, whose voice was like the ringing of bells, said. "Each trial will test different aspects of your potential, strength, strategy, intelligence, and adaptability. Fail, and you will be eliminated, but succeed, and you will ascend, your power and influence shaping the fate of galaxies." The weight of the words hit Eli. There was no turning back. The stakes were not just his life. They were the future of his entire species. Suddenly, the arena hummed with energy, and the platforms shifted. Eli's heart skipped a beat when a massive, hulking alien appeared across from him. It was a Gorethian, a species known for their immense physical strength and brutal fighting techniques. The alien towered over Eli, its skin a dull gray and its eyes a fiery red. In one hand, it held a massive, jagged blade, the edges crackling with energy. Eli swallowed hard. This was it, the first trial. The Gorethian roared, charging at him with terrifying speed. Eli barely had time to react. His instincts kicked in, and his body moved on its own, dodging the alien's first strike by mere inches. The blade cut through the air with a deafening hiss, and the force of the blow sent sparks flying. Eli stumbled but regained his balance just in time to see the Gorethian swinging the weapon again. But Eli wasn't just running anymore. As the Gorethian lunged forward, Eli felt something inside him stir, an instinctive pull toward the energy around him. His heart raced as he reached out with his mind, visualizing the energy from the environment. The air crackled with static, and Eli found himself manipulating the very electric currents in the atmosphere. With a single thought, he redirected the electricity into his hand, forming a crackling sphere of pure energy. The Gorethian's eyes widened in surprise as Eli threw the sphere at him. It struck the creature's chest, sending it stumbling back, momentarily stunned. The alien let out a guttural growl, but before it could recover, Eli used his newfound energy manipulation skills to create a burst of force that knocked the Gorethian off its feet and sent it flying across the arena. The crowd, alien spectators who had been watching the duel in silence, erupted into a cacophony of astonished murmurs. Eli's victory wasn't just about strength. It was the way he had harnessed the energy of his surroundings, using his mind and creativity to outmaneuver a foe far stronger than him. The Korshak leader's voice echoed through the arena. Impressive. For a human. There was no hint of mockery, only something close to admiration. You have passed the first trial. But this is only the beginning. There is much more to come. As Eli stood there, breathing heavily, his heart still pounding, he realized the enormity of what he had just done. He wasn't just fighting for his survival. He was fighting for humanity's place in the universe. Each trial would push him further, challenging his limits in ways he couldn't yet fathom. But for the first time, Eli felt something he had never experienced before. Power. A power unlike anything on Earth, something that could bend the very fabric of reality. But would it be enough? The trials had only just begun. The arena had barely begun to settle before the Korshik leader's voice echoed through the air, calling for the next trial. Eli stood on the edge of the floating platform, still panting from the adrenaline of his first victory. The Gorathian had been strong, far stronger than any human could hope to be. But Eli had won not with brute force, but with something far more elusive, his ability to manipulate energy, a power he hadn't known he possessed until it had coursed through him in that moment of desperation. But the sense of awe from the crowd was fleeting. Eli's mind was already racing. What else could I do? He wondered, staring at his hands as if expecting another spark of brilliance to emerge. His victory had been based on a gut instinct, not strategy. What would happen when the next trial tested him in ways he couldn't predict? The Korshik leader's voice rang again, this time with a strange, solemn cadence. The second trial will test your ability to adapt under extreme pressure. It will challenge both your mental and physical limits. Before Eli could react, the ground beneath him shifted with an eerie groan. The entire arena seemed to warp, and the familiar serene sky was replaced by an ominous landscape. The sky darkened, and monstrous clouds churned violently above. Eli looked around, his senses heightened by the unsettling change. Suddenly, massive, jagged mountains began to rise from the ground, and the platforms he was standing on began to sway. As he struggled to keep his footing, he realized the ground wasn't solid. It was an illusion. The very terrain beneath his feet was shifting in real time. You are now in the flux zone, the Korshik leader's voice boomed, where the very laws of physics are malleable. Your mind must stay sharp, or you will be consumed by the instability. Eli's stomach churned as he felt the temperature drop, his breath coming out in sharp clouds. A sudden wave of nausea overtook him as the environment flickered, and the ground twisted beneath him. This is no ordinary trial, Eli thought, his mind racing. He had to think fast. Without warning, the first obstacle appeared. The air crackled as an enormous beast materialized from the fluctuating landscape. It was a Voras, a creature known for its ability to phase through solid matter. The beast towered over Eli, its dark, shimmering body shifting in and out of visibility like a living mirage. Its sharp claws glinted with a deadly edge, and its eyes burned with an ethereal light. The creature lunged at him with unnatural speed, vanishing and reappearing in a blur of motion. Eli's heart pounded. He had no time to think, only to react. His mind raced as he felt the flux zone warping his perception. Time seemed to slow as the beast materialized in front of him. Eli didn't hesitate. He stretched out his hand, reaching for the raw energy in the environment. His fingers crackled with static as he channeled the unstable energy around him. The ground beneath him responded to his will, forming the shield of solidified plasma that absorbed the creature's strike. The impact was immense. He could feel the force of the blow travel through his entire body, but his shield held. For a brief moment, Eli marveled at the power he'd just conjured. The energy felt alive, as though he had tapped into something fundamental. But the Voras was relentless. It phased out of existence again and reappeared on the other side of him, launching another attack. This time, Eli wasn't as quick. The creature's claws raked across his arm, and pain shot through him. But instead of pulling back, Eli focused. He let the pain fuel his resolve. I have to control it, he thought, control the energy. As the Voras prepared to strike again, Eli closed his eyes. For a split second, he shut out everything around him. The shifting landscape, the storm of chaos. He reached deeper, into the very core of the flux zone itself. He could feel the gravitational pull of distant stars, the pulse of collapsing quasars, the flux of the entire universe, a constant rhythm, a heartbeat. With an intense focus, Eli willed the energy to obey. A burst of pure force erupted from his body, sending the Voras flying backward, its form collapsing into the unstable terrain. For a moment, it seemed to vanish entirely, consumed by the chaos. The ground stopped shifting. The beast was gone. The arena fell into a stunned silence. The Korshik leader's voice cut through the stillness, tinged with something akin to admiration. You have harnessed the flux and survived. Well done, human. But be warned. These trials will only grow harder from here. You are not the only one with power. Eli stood there, chest heaving, the weight of his powers pressing down on him. His mind buzzed, his body exhausted. He had tapped into something far more dangerous than he'd realized. The universe was full of unimaginable forces, and he was just beginning to understand how small, and yet how significant, his role would be in shaping it. The Korshik leader stepped forward, eyes fixed on him. You are ready for the next stage. Eli didn't feel ready, but he knew one thing for sure. There was no going back. The atmosphere had shifted once again. This time, a palpable tension hung in the air. Eli's body still hummed with the aftershocks of his victory in the flux zone, but that sense of accomplishment was fleeting. The next trial, the Korshik leader had warned, was not far off. However, before Eli could gather his thoughts or prepare for whatever came next, a new presence emerged from the edges of the galaxy. The skies above Xeranus darkened, as if a shadow had passed over the planet itself. The peaceful hum of the energy fields in the arena was replaced with a heavy, ominous silence. From the far reaches of the star system, a monstrous fleet appeared, its ships glinting under the harsh light of distant suns. Eli's heart sank as he saw the vessels, their design ancient and menacing. They were the ships of the Voreth, a race long thought to be dormant, lost to the annals of history. The Celestial Assembly had spoken of them in hushed tones, an ancient barbaric species capable of unimaginable destruction. The Voreth were not just conquerors, they were annihilators. And now, they were on the verge of bringing the galaxy to its knees. A voice, deep, low, and full of malice, broke through the silence, booming across the arena. It was not a physical voice, but one that pulsed within his mind. We have returned. The words reverberated through Eli's skull. The universe will fall to the true masters of existence. Nothing will stop the Voreth. The Korshik leaders, usually unshaken, exchanged looks of concern. For the first time since Eli had arrived, they seemed fearful. One of them, the leader who had first addressed him, stepped forward. This is no ordinary invasion, human. The Voreth do not seek to conquer. They seek to erase. Eli frowned, confusion mingling with his rising anxiety. Erase? What do you mean? The leader's voice grew darker. They have discovered the secret to erasing entire star systems from existence. The destruction is absolute. No trace of life or matter remains. A chill ran down Eli's spine. He thought of Earth, his home. Could they reach it? Could they destroy everything he knew and loved? What can we do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Korshik leader met his gaze with cold, calculating eyes. We can fight, but we cannot do it alone. Your abilities, what you have unlocked so far, are the only hope we have. The gravity of the situation hit Eli like a tidal wave. He had thought his trials were difficult, tests of his strength and intellect. But this was something far beyond what he had imagined. His powers had been awakened in a series of controlled environments, each designed to challenge him. But now, he was being asked to fight an enemy capable of wiping out entire solar systems, an enemy whose power eclipsed even the celestial assemblies. Suddenly, the space around them shimmered, and a massive rift opened in the sky above them. A ship descended from the rift, a monstrous vessel of obsidian black, pulsing with dark energy. The Voreth flagship had arrived. On board, a figure emerged, towering and clad in armor that seemed to absorb the very light around it. His eyes were glowing with an unnatural fire, and his voice was like thunder. I am Voreth Prime, he boomed, and this galaxy will bow before me. Your trials are over, human. You stand in the shadow of destruction. Your power, no matter how great, will fall before the might of the Voreth. Eli felt a surge of anger, an unfamiliar heat rising in his chest. He could sense the strength of this alien, the raw power radiating from him. But he couldn't let fear control him. Not now. "We won't let you destroy everything," Eli said, his voice steady, though his heart raced. Voreth Prime's laugh was deafening, echoing through the vast expanse of the arena. "You are nothing but a spark in the void. You will learn your place, just like the rest of your insignificant species." Before Eli could respond, a sudden blast of energy shot out from Voreth Prime's ship, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. The arena trembled, and the ground beneath Eli cracked open, sending him tumbling to the floor. Panic erupted in the ranks of the assembled spectators as the Voreth began their attack. Their ships unleashed torrents of destructive fire, targeting the very heart of the Celestial Assembly's stronghold. Eli's breath hitched. This was real. The battle was no longer a distant concept. The Voreth had arrived, and if they weren't stopped, the universe as he knew it could fall into eternal darkness. "Prepare yourself, human," the Korshik leader said, his voice filled with urgency. "Your trials were merely the beginning. Now, you must face the true test of your power." Eli stood, heart pounding, as the weight of his responsibility pressed down on him. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for everyone. Every living being across the galaxy, from his home on Earth to the furthest reaches of the stars. And this time, failure wasn't an option. The ground shook beneath Eli's feet as the Voreth unleashed their full might. The celestial city, once a hub of knowledge and peace, was now under siege. Alien ships, sleek and deadly, tore through the sky, launching relentless barrages of energy that tore through the atmosphere. The air crackled with energy, thick with the acrid smell of burning ozone. All around him, the once serene beauty of the Celestial Assembly's homeworld was rapidly becoming a war zone. Eli stood at the edge of the arena, heart pounding, but a strange calm had begun to settle over him. It was as if the trials he had faced, the powers he had unlocked, were not simply preparations for a game, but for this moment. "We must move quickly," the Korshik leader urged, his voice filled with urgency. "The Voreth seek to destroy everything in their path. They will tear down the walls of reality itself to reshape the galaxy in their image." Eli nodded, but he could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. His mind flashed back to the energy he had manipulated, the way he had used the flux zone to gain control over the chaotic forces. The raw power still buzzed within him, like an untamed storm. But this enemy, this Voreth Prime, was unlike anything he had faced, a being who seemed to control destruction itself. A deep growl rumbled from above as another massive Voreth ship descended, blocking out the stars. From the ship, a dark silhouette emerged. Voreth Prime stood at the forefront, his towering form barely visible against the blackened sky, but his presence was undeniable. He radiated malice, and Eli could feel it, a suffocating weight pressing down on him as the full extent of the threat became clear. "Human," Voreth Prime called, his voice booming across the battlefield. "You dare stand in my way. I will tear you apart, and the Celestial Assembly will be nothing but ashes in the wind." Eli clenched his fists, feeling his energy surge in response. His heart raced with determination, the innate power he'd discovered in himself now roaring to life. He had to fight back. He had to protect everything he loved, everything he had only just begun to understand. The Korshik leader stepped forward, his eyes narrowed with calculation. "You have learned to manipulate energy, human, but can you wield it against a force such as this?" Eli didn't hesitate. "I have to try," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. He took a deep breath, focusing on the energy in the air, the pulsing cosmic forces that surrounded them. This wasn't just about physical power. It was about bending the very fabric of reality itself. His mind had unlocked abilities he still couldn't fully comprehend, but now he would have to trust his instincts. A brilliant light flared from Eli's body as he extended his arms forward, focusing on the overwhelming storm of energy that threatened to tear apart the very planet. The ground around him vibrated as if the universe itself was reacting to his command. With a swift motion, Eli released a massive burst of energy from his hands, sending it crashing into the advancing ships. The blast tore through the sky like a comet, blasting several of the Vorith vessels into oblivion. The explosion sent shockwaves through the battlefield, rattling Eli's bones, but he held his ground. The energy was still within him, a boundless well that seemed to grow with each passing second. "You will pay for that, human," Vorath Prime snarled, his voice full of wrath. He raised his hands, and dark tendrils of energy shot from his fingertips, arcing toward Eli. The tendrils snaked around the air, a venomous storm of destruction aimed directly at him. Eli barely had time to react. The tendrils wrapped around him, constricting, tightening like steel bands, but Eli's newfound power flared in response. He felt the flux of energy from the ship's attack, from the destruction around him, and he forced it to his will. The tendrils of dark energy faltered, then disintegrated, the very particles scattering in the air as Eli's will collided with the Vorath Prime's dark force. "You think you can defeat me?" Vorath Prime hissed, his voice a mixture of fury and disbelief. "I am the embodiment of destruction itself." Eli's eyes narrowed as he pushed harder, focusing all his energy into a concentrated blast. "I'm not afraid of you," he shouted, letting the full force of his energy surge forward. The two powers collided with a deafening crack, sending a shockwave of pure destruction across the battlefield. The explosion rattled the heavens, and the entire arena trembled beneath the intensity of the clash. Eli's vision blurred as he struggled to maintain control, but he refused to back down. He had to stop Vorath Prime. The fate of the galaxy rested on his shoulders. And in that moment, Eli realized one undeniable truth. This was no longer just about power. It was about hope. The universe was counting on him, and he would not let it fall. The explosion of raw energy between Eli and Vorath Prime sent a shockwave that rippled through the entire battlefield. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The sky above Tyrannus was torn asunder, the very atmosphere shaking under the weight of their battle. The ground beneath Eli cracked and split, sending plumes of dust and debris into the air. The vast arena, once a symbol of cosmic peace, now resembled a war zone. The clash between human and Vorith was no longer just an isolated skirmish. It was a cataclysmic event that threatened to tear the fabric of reality itself. Eli's chest heaved, each breath a struggle as he fought to maintain control over the energy within him. The power he wielded felt limitless, yet the cost of using it was becoming painfully clear. His limbs trembled, his muscles burning with the exertion. But he couldn't stop. Not now, not with the fate of the universe hanging in the balance. Vorath Prime, though clearly staggered by the force of their clash, stood unyielding, his eyes blazing with dark fury. The dark tendrils that had once sought to strangle Eli were now swirling around him, taking shape once more, ready to strike again. "You think you can stand against the true power of the Vorith?" Vorath Prime sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "I am the harbinger of annihilation. You are nothing but a fleeting spark in the vastness of the void." But Eli stood firm. His hands glowed with the brilliant energy he had harnessed, the raw power of the cosmos now at his command. "Maybe," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him, "but even a spark can light up the darkness." Without warning, Eli thrust his hands forward, unleashing a wave of energy that exploded outward in every direction. The blast was like a supernova, intense, blinding, and all-encompassing. The Vorith Prime's tendrils collided with the energy, but this time, Eli's will was stronger. The dark power began to unravel in the face of the light he had called forth, the forces clashing and pushing against each other with an intensity that shook the heavens. Vorath Prime's eyes widened in surprise, and for the first time since their encounter, there was a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze, but it was quickly replaced by a seething rage. "You will regret this, human," he hissed, his voice now laced with venom. With a violent motion, Vorath Prime raised his arms, and the sky above him seemed to crack open. A rift appeared, blacker than the void itself, and from it poured a flood of dark energy. The Vorath leader summoned the full extent of his destructive power, the energy coalescing into a massive, destructive beam aimed directly at Eli. The beam ripped through the air, its destructive force threatening to vaporize everything in its path. Eli barely had time to react. He extended his arms, focusing every ounce of his power on the incoming attack. The beam collided with his energy shield, and the force of the impact nearly knocked him off his feet. The sky trembled as the two powers collided, the universe itself holding its breath. For a brief moment, Eli felt as if he were about to be overwhelmed. The power pouring from Vorath Prime seemed insurmountable. He could feel the darkness creeping in, threatening to swallow him whole. But then, deep within himself, he felt something stir, a flicker of the same determination that had kept him going through every trial, every obstacle. "This is not over," he thought, his grip on his powers tightening. "I can't lose now. I won't let them take everything." With a roar, Eli pushed forward, channeling every ounce of energy into a singular, focused beam of pure light. The two forces collided in a blinding explosion, the sound deafening, the intensity of the clash shaking the very foundations of the arena. And then, silence. For a moment, Eli couldn't hear anything. His ears rang, his body felt numb, and the world seemed to spin. When the light finally faded, Eli stood, breathing heavily, his body trembling from the exertion. But when his eyes cleared, he saw it, the Vorath flagship, hovering in the distance, its once pristine surface now cracked and smoldering. Vorath Prime's form, too, was faltering, his once indomitable presence now wavering. "No," Vorath Prime growled, his voice strained, his form flickering. "This can't be." "How?" Eli's eyes locked onto the Vorath leader, his heart pounding in his chest. "Because this isn't just about power," he said, his voice resolute. "It's about hope. It's about standing up when everything seems lost. You may have the strength to destroy, but I have the will to fight for everything worth saving." With that, Eli reached deep within himself and unleashed a final surge of energy. A concentrated blast of pure light, filled with all the hope, determination, and strength he had cultivated throughout his trials. The beam shot forward, piercing the dark rift above, and struck Vorath Prime with a force that seemed to shatter the very fabric of the universe. For a brief moment, everything went still. Then the Vorath leader's form collapsed, his massive, imposing figure crumbling into nothingness as the energy obliterated him completely. The dark power that had once threatened to consume everything evaporated into the ether, leaving behind only the faintest trace of its presence. The universe exhaled. The silence that followed the destruction of Vorath Prime was deafening. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire universe had paused, holding its breath in the wake of the cataclysmic clash. The dark rift in the sky closed with a final, echoing crack, and the shattered remains of the Vorath flagship drifted in the void like a ghost of what once was. Eli stood amidst the destruction, his chest heaving as he fought to steady his breath. The raw energy within him still crackled, though it had begun to settle into a familiar hum, a constant presence deep inside his being. His body was sore, his muscles aching from the intensity of the battle, but there was something else, a feeling of profound exhaustion, as though he had poured everything he had into the fight. And yet, despite the physical toll, there was a sense of clarity, a knowledge that he had done what needed to be done. The Korshik leader, who had watched from the sidelines, stepped forward, his eyes wide with awe and something deeper, respect. You did it," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "You defeated Vorath Prime. The Vorath are no more." Eli's gaze fell to the smoldering ruins of the battlefield. The once majestic city was now a scared, crumbling shell of its former self. The beauty of Tyrannus had been marred by the violence of the invasion. It would take centuries to rebuild, but the people of the galaxy had been saved. And that, Eli realized, was enough. But there was still a heaviness in the air, a lingering uncertainty. The war was over, but what came next? What had his actions set into motion? He had just defeated a godlike conqueror, but in doing so, he had also altered the course of history. Could he truly understand the weight of his decision? Could anyone? What now? Eli asked, his voice low and tired. The Korshik leader met his gaze, his expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. Now you must understand the full scope of what you've done. The Vorath were only a piece of the puzzle. Their destruction will shake the balance of power across the galaxy. Eli frowned. What do you mean? The Vorath were a threat, yes, but their presence had kept certain factions in check. Without them, new forces will rise, some far more insidious than they were. Power vacuums create chaos, and in the coming months, the galaxy will be thrust into a new era of conflict, one that we may not be able to control. Eli's stomach churned at the thought. His victory had come at a steep price. The galaxy was safe, yes, but the true battle, one of diplomacy, of maintaining peace, was just beginning. As if on cue, a communication device embedded in the Korshik leader's wrist flickered to life, projecting a holographic image of the Celestial Assembly's council. The leaders of various galactic factions, human, Korshik, and others, appeared on the screen. Their faces were a mix of astonishment, disbelief, and admiration. Eli, the human, the assembly leader spoke, his voice stern but filled with a newfound respect. You have done what no one thought possible. You have defeated Vorath Prime, the most powerful being to ever walk this universe. The Celestial Assembly owes you its survival. Eli bowed his head slightly, though he still felt the weight of the situation. I didn't do it alone. We all fought to survive. The assembly leader nodded gravely. True, but it is your power, your ability to harness energy in ways we cannot yet comprehend, that saved us all. You have redefined what is possible. You are the first of a new generation of beings, one who can shape the future of the galaxy. The words echoed in Eli's mind. A new generation. He wasn't sure if he was ready for that responsibility. He wasn't a leader, wasn't someone who sought to rule. He had only wanted to protect his home, his friends, and the people he had come to care about in this vast, unfamiliar galaxy. But the truth was undeniable. The trials, the challenges, the battles, it had all led to this moment. Eli had proven that he had the strength to stand against the most dangerous forces in the universe. Now, he would have to learn what it meant to be a true force for change. As the holographic communication flickered off, the Korshik leader gave him a somber look. The galaxy has changed forever, Eli. You've become something beyond what anyone expected. Eli stared out into the vastness of space, the stars flickering like distant beacons of hope. He had done what he set out to do. He had stopped the Vorath, but the road ahead would be long and uncertain. The universe, for better or worse, had been redefined. And now, it was time for him to find his place in it, not as a mere survivor, but as something far more powerful, far more enduring, a protector of a new dawn. The stars above Tyrannus flickered softly, their light no longer overshadowed by the threat of Vorath domination. The storm had passed, but the calm that followed was not one of peace. It was a pause, a breath taken before the world began to turn again. Eli stood on a balcony overlooking the planet, the wind tugging at his hair as he stared into the vastness of space. It had been days since the fall of Vorath Prime, and yet the gravity of what had transpired still weighed heavily on him. The galaxy had been forever changed by his actions. He had defeated an entity of unimaginable power, but he had also set in motion the unraveling of an old order. Now new forces would rise, both benevolent and dark, seeking to fill the void. A gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. "You've been standing here for hours," the Korshik leader said, stepping beside him. His tone was less formal now, more reflective. "Don't you think it's time to rest?" Eli shook his head, the exhaustion of the past days catching up to him. "I can't. Not yet." He paused, considering his next words. "There's too much at stake. I can't just sit back and wait for the next threat to rise." The Korshik leader studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I understand. But don't forget, Eli. Victory comes with its own kind of burden. You've already done more than any of us could have hoped. Now it's time to let others step forward and help shape this new future. You can't carry the weight of the galaxy alone." Eli turned to face him, his eyes tired but resolute. "I know. But I also know that I have the power to make sure we don't fall into chaos. I can help guide this galaxy into a new era, one where we can rebuild, where we can truly live in peace." The Korshik leader's eyes softened. "Then you've truly become the leader they need. Not just a soldier, not just a hero, but a guide, a beacon in the darkness. That's what this galaxy needs now. A new dawn." Eli looked out across the horizon, the twin moons of Tyrannus rising in the distance, casting long shadows across the land. The world was scared, its people weary, but the seeds of hope had been planted. The galaxy had endured an unimaginable war, but it had survived. And in survival lay the chance for rebirth. "A new dawn," Eli echoed softly. His heart surged with purpose. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a symbol, a catalyst for change. Days turned into weeks, and Eli began working with the leaders of the Celestial Assembly and other factions to rebuild the shattered galaxy. The Council of the Allied Systems, made up of representatives from every species and civilization that had once been part of the Assembly, reconvened. Together, they worked to establish new governance, one based not on power and control, but on unity and mutual respect. Eli's role was pivotal in this process, not as a ruler, but as a mediator and protector. His unique connection to the energy that flowed through the galaxy made him an indispensable asset, someone who could help bridge divides between species and harness the raw power of the cosmos for the greater good. But there were those who still resisted the changes, those who thrived in the old ways. Rebel factions, mercenary groups, and even some rogue elements within the Assembly sought to exploit the power vacuum left by the fall of the Vorith. They believed that chaos could be used to their advantage. Eli knew that his journey wasn't over. The galaxy was vast, its challenges endless. But for the first time since the war began, he felt a sense of clarity. His power was not just a tool of destruction. It was a force for creation, for balance. He had learned to wield it wisely, to protect not just his home, but all the lives across the stars. As Eli stood on the balcony once more, the winds of change at his back, he realized that the true battle wasn't against an enemy. It was against apathy, against the forces that sought to keep the galaxy in turmoil. And he would stand against them always. The stars above no longer seemed so distant, so cold. They were beacons, just like him. And together, they would shine the way forward into a brighter, more unified future. A new era was beginning, and Eli was ready to lead it.